Hello, I'm Katie Malcolm, an instructional consultant at the University of Washington Center for Teaching and Learning, which is a partner of the Waseda University Center for Teaching, Learning, and Technology. I'm here today on Zoom with my colleagues from the University of Washington and Waseda University to ask them about how the principle of students becoming self-directed learners has helped you understand your students and their learning.
In my composition classes, I use a rubric for all written assignments, and I share that rubric with my students at the beginning of the course. I found that it helps students understand what I want them to do and also to prioritize more important aspects of writing. I also found that a rubric is a good tool for students to monitor their progress, be more metacognitive about their writing. When my students begin to work on their first assignment, I reserve about 45 minutes of class time for what we call a norming session. In a norming session, I share with students a short sample paper, and then I ask them to grade that paper using the rubric. My rubric usually has 6 criteria. For each criterion of the rubric, students have to assign a grade, and then they have to write a brief explanation why they assigned that grade. So for example, if they are grading a sample paper and on the first criterion they give 4 out of 5 points, they also have to explain in one sentence what was strong enough in the paper to warrant a 4, which is a solid grade, but also what was missing that the grade for this particular criterion was 1 point short of 5. Surprisingly, students tend to be quite harsh graders. Their grades are usually lower than what I would give the sample paper. But the important thing is that once they go through the process of grading a paper using a rubric, students get a clearer picture of how the rubric applies to writing. So when they go back to revise their own essay, they're more objective in assessing how well they are doing in their own writing. They find it also easier to spot what they need to work on. They realize more easily why something is not working well, and they're better at figuring out how to make improvements. So my main goal of using a rubric is to have students continuously assess the process of writing rather than just the final product, the paper itself.
When I was a senior in college, I wrote my graduation research report. Before I had to write my graduation research report, I wasn't able to make a research plan, and I didn't even know where to begin. When I entered graduate school, I mentored undergraduate students, and I helped them write their graduation research reports. At that point, I was able to plan my students' research and monitor their activities. Undergraduate students that I worked with had the same experience that I had as an undergraduate. Usually, they were not aware of what and how they were studying. It is only with year-long experience that students can learn to plan and monitor their learning. And usually, this does not happen until students enter graduate program. The challenge for us instructors is, how do we integrate metacognition into the courses at the undergraduate level? One possibility is for students to group up with junior, senior, and graduate students so that junior students can learn from seniors and graduate students. That way, junior students can begin to build metacognition with both my support and the support of other students. And senior students benefit too, since talking to junior students and mentoring them is an opportunity for senior students to reflect on their own metacognition.
When I started writing in my college classes, I had a fixed mindset about writing. I did not understand that I could improve as a writer, but saw myself and my classmates as either good or bad writers. If I received a poor grade on an essay, my thought was that my professor simply didn't like me, or that I just wasn't smart enough to understand the assignments. Finally, during my 3rd year of college, a professor helped me realize that writing is a practice with component parts that I could focus on, develop, and improve over time. I see this fixed mindset in my students as well, and I know that just as it was for me, it is also important for my students to have a teacher who helps them correct their fixed mindset thinking about writing. So in addition to telling my students that writing can improve with goal-directed practice and feedback over time, I show this to them in a few ways. First, I also use a rubric to grade their papers so that they can see exactly what they did well and which areas need improving. This helps them to see writing as a task with component parts that they can practice and improve upon for each, rather than something that they are simply good or bad at. And I will also ask students to reflect on their learning process and write about what they are improving. For example, when they turn in their first paper, I will ask them to also submit a brief reflection paragraph, explaining what they see as their strengths and weaknesses in that paper. In my feedback to them, I'll address their responses in this paragraph so that they can see where their own self-assessment matches mine and where it doesn't. For example, if something that they see as a weakness is actually not a weakness, but a strength. I ask my students to reflect on and keep track of their progress as writers over the term, so that by the end, they have a real sense of how they've improved and progressed.